Yo, what's going on, man? This is the BeBall Jones podcast. I am simply a basketball trainer with a basketball podcast. My goal is to present the game to you from a different angle, educate you with a unique perspective, and also change your mindset along the way. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoy.
You're pretty smart, you know. I see why they call you doctor, you know.
Oh man,
No, but
but I appreciate it. I appreciate it. But in the day, like as long as I can explain it to the players for them to understand, and the fact that they trust me, that's like the biggest thing. And they know like I advocate for them, um, advocate in even as such as like you're in meetings and someone says something about a player that you like that talks about their character, you're like, nah, bruh, mm-mm. I've known them for 4 years now, or and it's not saying I'm telling their business, but like that's not right. Like, I think that's where the trust comes in, and they know, like, I treat them as if that was my brother. Like, you're my little brother. Like, of course, some of them are young, but like, I'll treat
yeah,
them like they know, like, I'll go to bat for them, and they know, like, I will not try to put them in a situation where if they don't look ready, if they don't objectively look ready, I'm not pushing it. And unfortunately, I have to bite that bullet because say if there could be a coach or somebody like, yo, I think you're being too conservative. Why do you think da 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 da? But because if that person mentally is not ready as well, on top of some of the objective findings, and they don't play as they normally do because they're being hesitant or a little fearful, that could set them up, God forbid, for another injury because they're not moving how they normally move.
hmm.
So yeah, went off
How
on a
do you
little
have those
tangent.
tough conversations though? No, I mean that's interesting though. Like,
Yeah.
how do you deal with those tough conversations, especially with certain players who are a little bit more valuable and have a little bit higher impact to the team, but it's like you're not okay. Like every metric that I go by says you're not okay. You might feel okay, but this chart or this test says you're not okay. I can tell by your movie you're not okay, but you want to play. So how do you have that conversation with
Yeah,
them?
so it's a dance, and you have to make sure you involve the player. So I shouldn't be up there only talking about, yo, look on these measurements. We got to pull you from practice. Like, we can't have you play. That can't be the thing because then you come off as like police officer, as we didn't hit your numbers or you went over your numbers. I think we got to chill. We got to calm down. But I think it's more of a conversation like, how do you feel before I even tell them objectively what I see? Because they may ask me what I see, then fine, I'll answer it that way. But first, I want to see, how do you feel? Do you feel comfortable in the movements? Do you feel in the testing that we did or the court work that we simulated with the coaches? How do you feel? Do you feel confident? Do you feel like, what do you feel like sticking? Some of them be like, yo, every time I go around a screen to then catch the ball and shoot, that's where I feel my ankle. But I can go up and down the floor. I could go side to side defense or drop back and play defense and I'm fine. But it's just something about going around the screen or a DHO and have to curl around. And you may see that. For example, I may see as I'm checking their ankle, it doesn't want to move that way, or they're going into this motion and they're like, ooh, I get that pulling sensation and it doesn't feel good. You're going to see that on the court, how they move. So my objective finding is like, okay, on the table didn't look good, or we did an exercise and he had to do like a side lunge and he was very hesitant on it. So I'm going to expect to see that on the court. So if the player is, a lot of these players are in tune with their bodies too. So a lot of them like, okay, this is what I have going on. So then now we need to talk about, okay, this is what I saw. You feel this way. They're like, no, but I really want to play, da da da. For example, Madison Square Garden, like, I got to play, da 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 da. Like, you have to also keep in mind, like, their their desire, but the longevity. And sometimes you do have to play like big sister, or sometimes you have to involve other people. For example, you need to involve your medical director. You might need to involve like coaching and stuff like that. Just be like, well, based on, it could be like, for example, based on the opponent, we probably actually don't want to play you. Or if you're comfortable, we might do minute restrictions. And if some players are like, I don't want to do a minute restriction, then it's like, well, that's a compromise you would come up with. And if you can't compromise in that standpoint, we rather not risk the other games we have going on, especially if like Madison Square Garden is on a Monday, but Friday and Saturday is a back to back. Like, we kind of want to make sure we can be ready for that back to back, or the All-Star break the All-Star weekend that's coming up, because there's going to be an All-Star game. Um, the rest of the season. So sometimes you do have to talk more futuristic, especially if they are a high end player, meaning what they like to call like an investment. Versus there could be someone on the team he's trying to play for his contract. So that's going to be different. You tell them the risk. I don't treat them like, oh, I ain't gonna just let him. I'm just not gonna let him know that, you know, he's 80% ready. Da da da. No one's gonna be
Yeah.
100% ready at the pro level. It don't matter if it's NFL, MLB, whatever. So you're not gonna be 100%. But there is a risk and benefit ratio. You need to make sure you understand, like give and take. Like, okay, maybe the back to back we don't play, or et cetera, et cetera. But if there's a player who is fighting for the contract because maybe the trade deadline's coming up and they don't know where they stand and their agent could be telling them this and that. No, it's not good. It doesn't influence too much, but say if that comes out from the player, like, yo, like I really am I'm trying to push to play this, and this, that's when you need to have the conversation of the risk so they understand. But they know, like, okay, if you're willing to take this risk because you're trying to get a playing spot or you're trying to get a contract or X, Y, and Z, then if you're willing to take this risk and you understand where it's coming from, then let's plan that out. And if we need to do minute restrictions, that's one way. If we need to like check in after every quarter to like how you feel, da da da, halftime, let's do another assessment. Quick 5 minute assessment, see how you're doing, see how everything's moving. We can do it that way. We can even talk with the coaches, and I think the biggest thing is that communication piece. There could be a rotational thing. For example, if the coach has, based on the opponent, like, yeah, I actually plan on playing the player if he's medically cleared. I actually plan on playing the player a lot because of this opponent. Like, he'll be really good playing against this system. And, for example, he may ask you, the coach may ask you, or you could just suggest, if you guys have that type of relationship, which is important. Do you want to do 2 to 5 minute rotations, or for example, like meaning the substitution route? So it's like, okay, I think based on this type of thing, if we don't do minute restrictions, we might have to do 3 minute rotations. Or if the coaching style is like, yo, he usually does 5 minute rotations, know that about your coach and how he does things, to say, okay, well then based on that, each quarter, let's just play 5 minutes each quarter. Or we could say 10 minutes each quarter, which is a lot, but meaning like if that's the type of route you want to go, making sure the player is fully involved in the process, even if it's just like them saying, okay, I get that. Oh, I'm cool with that. Because they may not even notice that it's affecting their play. But if they're really fixated on like, yo, there's a minute restriction, so I may get hot and, they're going to pull me because of this minute restriction, that's when you need to have that conversation. You need to have like a soft cap, unless it's a true orthopedic issue and it's a hard cap. You need to have maybe like, 10-15 minute max, or like per half it's 10 to 15 minutes max. Like have a range, because there could the play could keep going. For example, they get fouled, they're at the foul line, they can't get subbed out. Like think about those scenarios, and as long as everybody's on the same page and they understand the ebbs and flows of it, then you shouldn't run into too many issues or miscommunication or misunderstanding.
Yeah, that's funny when you talk about the minute restriction stuff. I wasn't on minute restriction, but I was getting subbed out one day, and I was at the free throw line, and then you hear the buzzer, and they're like, "Oh, I'm getting shooter." Like, well, I'm finna miss this free throw because I ain't finna get subbed out. It's just a random story. I don't know what that came from,
Yeah, no, I
but
understand. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, and then also too, like it depends too. Even if you were to make the shot, like some refs may say, "Oh, it's not even time to get subbed in anyway." So, like you may not even get subbed. Uh, so it all depends on a lot of different stuff, or like what's going on, or if it's a
Mhm.
yeah, it's so funny, but it's a dance at the end of the day, because some
Yeah,
players, they're gonna be frustrated regardless. Some players, they do not want minute restrictions. They don't like even the term to hear minute restriction because they feel boxed in. So knowing
yeah,
your player is gonna be huge, because it's like, okay, well then we might need to wait another game. And if you cool waiting in the game, that next game you might actually not be on minute restrictions, or the upcoming game schedule has a back to back. Well, then we might need to sit one of these games. Out of the games, do you want us to talk with the coach to figure out which one he actually wants to utilize you more? Or is there, something that, if example, if the coach is saying, oh, it's up to the player, then we can talk to the player like, is there a game that out of those two, like you're like, yo, I gotta play because so and so's playing and I gotta beat his da 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 da. Like you gotta understand, like they're humans, they have like the friendly competition. So
Mm.
like you have to like keep some of that stuff in mind too.
Yeah. So speaking of that, like, how do you deal with the min restrictions and stuff like that with somebody who is a hooper? Like, min restrictions is nothing to me, man. Like, I just want to play basketball. So how do you deal with that when they don't even like compute in their brain? If I go out on this basketball court, I'm doing me. And if you take me out, especially while I get rolling or I'm about to get rolling, like, how do you deal with that too, with the conversation with the coach and everything?
That's what I was saying. You need to have that ahead of time. Like, do
Mm,
not wait till the game or the day before. Like, I'm not saying you can't wait the day before the game because there's so many games sometimes that the conversation, the timing may happen before the game. But leading up to that point, whatever it is, if it's God forbid a, when they say orthopedic issue, like something that popped up, like the knee got inflamed or something, and they know it may influence their performance. So that's something that you have to keep in mind objectively when you're talking to them. It shouldn't always be about like, oh, based on how you feel, based on how you feel. Because sometimes they could feel good because adrenaline is running, but then their knee gets so inflamed after the game or halftime, they're not even good for the they can't play another game right after, especially if it's a
yeah.
back to back. So you have to give them that forecast. And it's not saying I'm solely that person making a decision because we have in professional sports, we have performance scientists who deal with like load management and how, oh, you had all these different games and you play this many minutes, da 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 da. We know from your history, you may get to a certain, when I say game minutes, including practice minutes, where your performance may go down. Or we may say, okay, well, let's do objective measures like force plate testing to give us an idea of like, is your performance going down a little bit? And you can't put all your eggs in one basket, so you need to have other tests and other things, but you have to make sure you talk to the player and they understand like there's a risk if you play longer or more than we're anticipating that it could backfire on us with the future games. It's not like football. We don't have just one game a week. Like we
Mm,
have to keep in mind, like for example, looking at the month schedule, there could be one month where there's a lot of back to backs. Like keeping that in mind, like you have to track ahead of time. We can't just look at just 1 week in advance. So sometimes you have to take out the calendar of the game schedule and look at and showing the player like, hey, this is what we have going on. Based on this, what we could do if you don't want to do minute restrictions, let's look to the back. Let's look at the back to backs. And um, this week and next week we have two back to backs. So
mm,
let's look at like resting one of these back to backs and see how you're doing, and then let's check the next week and go from there. Or it may be, oh, I want to play. If we feel like medically they could play both back to backs, but maybe a minute restriction because they're fine with that, then it's like make sure it's clear. Just like you play, like when you um go into an agreement with someone, you make sure everything is clear. You make sure you ask them, you have any questions, do you have any, anything that you want to have, because the last thing you want is God forbid a player complaining, and not just to other players but like media. Like there's been examples on social media, going to media, going to the coach or something like that. We don't want that. So we want to make sure
yeah.
everything is clear, because there are some instances where some medical staff didn't even communicate with the player. They're just being dictated on what's going on. And I think just like with anything, you go up to somebody, you don't communicate with them, but then when game time happens or the day of whatever, an event, then you start telling them, oh, this is what we're going to do. And you're like, whoa, what? Or I think that's where usually the problem comes in, versus if they're adamant on like no game restriction, game minute restrictions, then this is the other compromise. Here are options. And you may have just two options that you can do, but you're just trying to make sure they understand the risk of, if you were to play more, whether it's meaning another, like the back to back, or if you did this, you risk then next week when we have these big time opponents. Like sometimes you have to think about some of those things like, oh, we're playing this team, there's a lot of injuries or they're not as good, or like having some of that and talking with the coaches, talking with the player. And sometimes you may have everybody in the party together. I mean, talking before and then talking with the player, making sure the player is like supported and that we're not trying to control them, but we're looking
Hmm.
out for them because yes, they're an investment, but also too, you don't want them to ever say they put me in a bad situation where they could have restricted me and they didn't or gave me the option and then they let me go out there and play. And there are examples that I won't say, but I mean, it's all over social. There's been on social media where someone played and they weren't ready to play, but instead of saying, but if you don't give the player the option or let them know the risk, and they're like, no, I just want to hoop, I just want to ball, but you don't tell them the risk, and they just go do it anyway. Unfortunately, it can fall back on medical, and I don't want it. I don't want that. I'm sorry. Let's talk about all our options here. Like, let's make sure we're clear.
Yeah, I think that y'all are always in a awkward spot because externally you don't get the blame because like we don't see you and know you. We
Yeah.
just kind of know coaching staff and medical staff. That's all we is. We just hear medical staff, so we just have this image in our brain and it's like okay, it's y'all fault. We don't have a face to it, but internally we have a face, name, birth certificate, ID. We have all the details of knowing who this is. So, how do you manage both halves of it? Because external, like they don't know who you are, but they like they're talking about you, but they don't know they're talking about you. But internally, you have that pressure too. So, how do you manage the public perception with the private perception too?
Well, I'll say like it's not just on my own. So I don't like currently speaking, I don't have like I'm the sole person. However, we're a collective group. So whether I do say medical staff and it may
Mm-hmm.
include physicians, et cetera, et cetera. You need to make sure you have a tight communication or relationship with your physicians as well, because there could be some instances where some people don't, some medical staff don't agree with the physician because the physician will be like, oh yeah, they're good to go, da da da. Like there are examples of that, but the physician doesn't know like the demands. Some of them, I don't say all, I don't want a general statement. Some don't have an understanding of the demands and that they have to do because they don't have the all the data. They're probably looking at just the knee joint. Oh yeah, the knee is very stable. The knee is great. Like moving around. Okay, good. They should be good. And it's like, yeah, but they're not moving properly through the range of motion. Say if we put them in the weight room, maybe they're not moving properly. So it's something to keep in mind. Like structurally, they're good, but dynamically, we need to see what they do, whether in a controlled setting onto the court with some coaches, getting all that situated, making sure that is clear and comfortable. So, for example, you don't want to not have a system, you don't go through a battery or test, and you just go through certain things like jogging or something that's not even sports specific, but just elementary aspects, and don't put them in situations that will test them before they get into a game like situation because you cannot simulate a game. You could try the best you can, but the adrenaline is not going to be the same. The intensity is not going to be the same. You could try to get high intensity, moderate intensity, all that good stuff, but you want to make sure you just prepare the athlete as best as possible so they feel confident in their staff. You want the player to be confident in medical staff. Like, you're not going to put me out here, make me look like a hot mess, or put me at a risk of, God forbid, an Achilles injury, et cetera, not naming names. You want to make sure the player feels comfortable. The player knows of all the risks. The physician is there as well. They're, objectively talking about all the scenarios that could possibly play out, not just all the positives, but just understanding the risk as well. Making sure the player has any questions, and that's also the player have being comfortable with you. So you need to develop a relationship with the player, and it's not so transactional. When it's transactional, they may not feel comfortable talking to you. They'll be like, "Oh, I'm gonna just talk to my trainer on the side, like the trainer I got, that I see when I'm in Miami." Da 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 da. Like you need to make sure that you guys it's an open relationship and it's very trusting and knowing that when players know that you care. So at the end of the day, like that player knows you care, they're not really as worried like, oh, they're gonna have me out here and I don't feel ready or whatever. Because sometimes the
Yeah.
players could be confident of like, oh, I'm ready, I could do this, da da da. But sometimes you do have to. When I say hold them back, you're only showing them objective stuff of like, yo, you see this, like you're only 75, this leg is only 75% as strong or 75% as symmetrical as the other side. So you have to give them that type of perspective instead of just feel like, oh, you feel good, let's go. Oh, you look good, let's go. It can't be the look and feel test. You need to have objective measures because that's usually how, unfortunately, some people get bit when they just go look and feel, and then now we have certain protocols, or could have audits and different stuff, or you don't want the player thinking you were negligent or you didn't do the best you could to put him in the best light. So I know I got off on the tangent, but at the end of the day, it's a collective thing, and just making sure that you have the relationship and it's unified front. So the player is knowing that you're in support of them, and the player knows that you won't put them in a bad light. So then you don't hear it's you. There's less likely for that player to badmouth you with media. So even if they say, "Oh," media may say, "Oh, medical staff has deemed this person as unavailable for this game." They may say, "Oh, media may say we're going to reassess in 2 weeks." Da 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 da. No, we're not going to say complete details to media, but you also, as a medical staff, need to have good relationship with your team media of what's being portrayed and said. Then it needs to be communicated. That's why communication is important. Then the communication to the head coach, who's going to be interviewed by media, knows what's going on and what you can tell media and what it's for media to understand as well. So you're not saying, because sometimes you don't want to say definitive statements like, "Oh yeah, he'll be ready in 2 weeks." You don't want to say that. You could say, "Oh, we may say take it day by day, plus or minus 2 weeks." Like some statements of some framework that's not so fixated. Just like we talked about the game minute restriction, you don't want to say like, "Oh, 10 minutes max." This could be a soft cap, hard cap, but it needs to be like a range, like 10 to 15 minute, soft max, soft game minute restriction, like stuff like that. So then when 2 weeks roll around, media's not saying, "Well, we don't know what's going on with this hamstring. We're still waiting on when this person can play. It's been 4 months," or you don't want that if possible. So you have to make sure you have that relationship with the player. It can even be with the agent, so that because the agent sometimes maybe a lot of times they get contacted by media. So the agent's on the same page with you, media's on the same page, the physician, the head coach, and the player. If you have that, because the player's at the center, I mean, it's a dance. At the end of the day, you just want to make sure that's good, and then you should be fine. When I say should be fine, meaning like you have a better handle on it versus you just dictating on what's being said and done. You're not talking to all parties, so you're leaving it up to assumption that they can say what they want, because from their perspective, it's like, "Oh, they're not doing everything they can," or
Yeah.
they're not putting them, giving the best medical care. You don't want that going out to media, like by all
Yeah.
means. So you want to make sure like everybody's taken care of. You ask them, "Hey, everything's going well. Any questions?" And making sure then the player feels comfortable to talk to you of any uncertainty. So
It doesn't matter that you're a beginner and you're just starting. That's not an excuse. Or like the fact that you started in 7th or 8th grade hooping doesn't mean that you like can't get better and play catch up. Like no. So I need you to do one thing for me. Okay. Focus on you. All right. Stay in your lane and make every day a battle of you versus you. So you have to be better than how you were yesterday. Doesn't matter how much you fumbling, bumbling around. Doesn't matter. So you need to like check yourself, breathe for a second, and go work out and just go get better. But wait, before you go, grab you a t-shirt as a reminder that progress is on the go.
When you said that, when you broke down the communication of who's all involved, I think within there's been two instances, and you kind of hinted at one, but two instances where like outside looking in, it was handled terribly. I'm a huge D Rose fan. Like D Rose is my guy. So when the whole situation around him happened, it was like the media came out and was reporting, "Hey, D Rose should be back." The team says he's cleared to be back, but he's just not playing. How does that happen to where you get in so many different messages? Like D Rose says he's not good, he doesn't feel good, so he's sitting out. Then coach come out and says something, and then owner says this, and this player say. How does that happen from your point of view? How does that whole miscommunication happen with that?
so I can't speak specifically on that, because
Yeah,
yeah, it's a
yeah.
player, but then also too, I wasn't there. So I
Mm.
would also be the outside looking in, but semi inside of the medical space when it comes to the NBA. And because of that's not the only situation, that's a good example, but not the only example. A lot of it is just like what I was saying before. Those parties are not communicating with each other, and you need to have a leader who's going to make sure they all get the same message or get an understanding or hear back from that party. What are you not understanding, or what are your thoughts on that? So, for example, if you know the player's going to go to media, most likely it goes coaches, the head coach first, and then it goes player, and you may even get front office or, yeah, front office involved, just depending on the situation or what's at hand.
Mm-hmm.
Very rarely do they have a medical professional out there in media taking questions. So that's where it gets tricky, because the medical person can't advocate or say, clarify, like, oh, this is what's going on. That's why you, as a medical person, whoever the medical director is, whether they use that term, director of rehab, VP health, whatever term they like to use for that organization, that person needs to be the leader of the communication, making sure the head coach has the same message. And it's not saying the same message as like, just repeat this, just say this, but making sure they understand what's at play, what's going on. So they know, like, most likely you had conversations leading up to that point, because you're seeing the player every day, sometimes multiple times a day, and you're updating the coach, not saying multiple times a day, but say, for example, a game is there's a game tomorrow. You don't want to wait till game day as your only time you're communicating with the coach, a player, the media. No, no, no. If they're like, oh, they may be game time decision, or we'll know more by shoot around, like for game day or for game ability, or you're like, well, we did an evaluation, he looks like he's not ready. Like those things, making sure then all the parties involved, they're very well informed. And you ask them if they have questions, follow-up questions, anything they want clarified before they get in front of a media and a reporter asks a question that they don't know the answer to, and they may assume based on their assumption or their perception, like, this is what's going on. You need to get ahead of that. Just like I like to say is, like, say if somebody's dating somebody and that girl's like, oh, I think he's cheating, da 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 da, and they have all these things play in their head, and their friend is like, yeah, girl, you think this is going on? Don't. That's what creates dysfunctional relationships, because then you start thinking like, oh, your boyfriend's cheating. Dang, okay, he didn't answer my text within 5 minutes. Oh, so that means he's doing this and this and this. And as a guy, you're probably like, bro, that is so ridiculous. But you know what I'm talking about, because if the communication is not clear, I'm like, hey, I'm going to be busy, I'm going to be at work, or I'm doing a podcast, so I'll be unavailable for an hour, hour and a half, and you don't that's why I may not text you back right away. Like, not having that communication leads up to assumption, which then creates a lot of room and loopholes. So if you do not communicate with all the stakeholders, player, head coach, could be assist. Sometimes you have to add the assistant coach, because say if the head coach, yes, disseminates the information to the assistant coach, but sometimes there may be video coaches or player performance like coaches, like, or player development coaches, like, so coaches that may not be assistant coaches, but they're in the video room. You don't know who's talking. You never know with media. I'm not saying TMZ, but you just never know who be hitting up like video coaches and say, hey, what do you think is going on with da 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 da? So I'm not saying you have to tell everybody's business, but it's if you're on a team, you want to make sure everybody's getting a similar message. So if that's like you having those conversations with the player, with the head coach, assistant coach, strength coach, do not leave them out. And with the agent, if you need to add the agent, like what's going on, because you just want to make sure it's a clear message. That's one way. And then I say, as a staff, you guys need to have something like, if possible, like a staff meeting. It could be 5 minutes, because the coaches may be meeting. You're like, oh, coaches are meeting at 8:30 on Monday morning. Okay, I'll pop in at 8:30, and you're communicating with the head coach like ahead of time. I'm gonna pop in, just give some player updates. And for 5 minutes, you're in there. The performance scientists may talk about like, oh, based on the practice recommendations, we hit these numbers, or let's see if, because of our heavy game day schedule, we taper our practice down a little bit lower, X, Y, and Z. Like, they may do that. And then it's like, okay, player updates, these 3 players, I just had 3 player updates, and you may go one by one and say, this is what's going on. They're plus or minus 2 weeks to getting back onto the court, not playing, but onto the court. I'll talk a lot more detail with the assistant coach that works with this player to make sure you guys know some things movements we need to stay away from on the court. We need to test some things out in the weight room. We need to do some measurements and tests on the table or in the training room before we feel comfortable allowing them to do that on the court. Like making sure all this stuff is clear. So when a media, and also every team has PR. So that public relations person, you need to make sure you're in communication with. Don't leave it up to chance. And if they're a good PR person, they're coming to you anyway. They're coming, hey, like, what's going on with so-and-so? What do you want to say for this upcoming game? Are they probable? Are they unlikely? And what body part? Or like they may ask, and the good PR person, like they may ask, like, what's the timeline? And then that's when you say, well, we're going to we're going to go head into a second opinion, and that appointments later this week will have better insight to give you a timeline after that. And that could be a simple message that you tell for all stakeholders and media. So when a reporter asks the head coach, oh, we're awaiting a second opinion and we're going to receive better details. Even though it's vague, but it's not like, oh yeah, they should be ready by tomorrow. I saw them on the court. They looked pretty good to me. Or I saw them dunk during a pregame court thing, and man, I'm saying they look good. Because you're thinking that dunk means that's an explosive movement, they can play, but it's like if it's a certain injury, yeah, some of the injuries you can dunk, but it doesn't mean you can sprint up and down the floor or you could play defense, be reactive to your opponent. But as media or like a fan's like, oh, okay, so he can do that, huh? But he can't play. So then it starts those things. So keeping that in mind, like even talking to the player, like, okay, you're not playing this game for your pregame stuff. Let's actually try to do things in the morning instead of doing everything at the arena. Do in the morning, test some stuff out. So when you get to the arena, you're just doing, if you want to get on the court, yeah, I want to get on the court. Let's do some ball handling, some passes, some shooting, keep it nice and light. We already did our heavy workout or court workout in the morning. There's no need to do that in the afternoon. And guess what? There's no cameras in the morning. We let obviously media lets cameras in maybe towards the end of the shoot around or X, Y, and Z or after the court work session, but you're not having cameras looking at and zooming in and speculating, oh, they look ready to us. And the reporter's like, well, I think they look ready. That's the perception, it's a fishbowl. You have to know what it could look like from the outside coming in. And that's why I'm very grateful to be working, or the amount of years I've worked here, to see some of that stuff and how we want to get a better grasp on perception and communication and clarity with all stakeholders involved, that you can avoid a majority of it. I'm not saying you're going to avoid everything, but you're doing the best you can to make sure you don't have situations as what you see on the internet or on Hoop Hypes and Hoops Hype and all this other stuff, like, oh, they look ready, or the player says this, but medical staff says this. Like, if we can avoid that, like, yo, let's avoid that. Like, let's not, if we can, like, let's not do that.
Yeah. I think that was the whole issue with him, because it was so many different messages coming out. Like, why does nobody know what's going on? Like, and it's frustrating as a fan, because it's like Derrick Rose was probably the most beloved player at that time in the league. Like, it was like him and KD were like neck and neck for the guy everybody, like, you look silly hating on them too. So it's like at that time it was like, what's going on, man?
Yeah.
Like, coach saying one, players saying other, media saying this, and like, so it's seeing your point of view, like telling me the insight of how the communication goes. Of course, the time's a little different because that was like 10 years ago, a little bit more.
Yeah.
So, and it's a different organization. Like, there's so many differences, but you still get a good understanding now of like, okay, this is like a peek behind the scenes of what goes on in the organization.
Right.
So it's still disappointing all these years later, because D-Rose is my guy. So.
Hey. No, I understand. Whatever we could do to create longevity in their career and make it good quality, because the quality of their play, quality of their career can flow into quality of life even during their season, because they're a person. They're going to have relationships, whether they're married, dating, they have a child, parents, and then when they stop playing basketball, what can we do to make sure we don't have them so degraded or to the point where you don't even recognize them. You're like, yo, that's so and so. Like, and I'm not talking about like weight gain or something, because that's most likely their decision, but meaning like the knee joint. What could we do to make sure the knee joint's good? We're not just keep injecting the knee because that's
Yeah, Kenny
probably
Smith
what.
walk.
Yeah, because that's kind of how it was until
Mm,
initially, and some people coming in and challenging like, yo, just because you have back pain doesn't mean we have to keep injecting the back, or let's not do. I mean, obviously case by case. Let's not just keep doing like a partial discectomy, meaning like removing part of the tissue that you might need. Like there's certain things like what are other ways we could do? Is it acupuncture? Is it taking anti-inflammatory, like actual natural supplements on top of an anti-inflammatory diet? Like, is it need to work on sleep? Do we need to work on like how your brain and your body's or your brain is responding to what's going on? Change the minutes. Like, there's different things. Like, what can we do instead of just pumping or injecting every time? But just an example.
mm. Okay. Um, dang, it's that time. Um, Crazy. Anything else? Okay, let me ask you this question. This is a good question. What is something that you haven't been asked that you want to answer to, but you haven't been asked before? And we're gonna act
Oh,
like I asked you
oh,
that.
oh, oh, oh. Uh, I guess. I mean, I've gotten this question before, but it's not as like common. But just like being a female in this space and being married and balancing marriage and that. So, for example, I'm, for example, most entities like MLB, NFL, NBA, you could be the man and then you're married and your wife is a stay-at-home mom or a stay-at-home wife or they don't have to work. Um, but like say in my situation is just like, okay, how does that look? How do you handle that X, Y, and Z? So, long story short, before I even got to the NBA, I wanted to work in the NBA and there was no one before me. So I am the first black female when it comes to being a physical therapist athletic trainer in the NBA. So of course, when you're telling other people, whether you're in school, oh, I want to work in the NBA, which I mean, if you're gonna tell your goals, just know that people are gonna call you crazy. So yes, I won't speak on certain schools, but I was told it's crazy. But you need to be with somebody who believes in your crazy behind. So my husband at the time was
Mm,
my boyfriend, believed in me and was like, yo, whatever we got to do. Like he literally was down. Like you need somebody who's down for you. So like that's important. Whether it's like you want to be the best person at um like media or the best person at this, you can have someone who is so supportive of you, no matter how crazy it sounds. Because your dreams need to scare you, but you don't need to have a spouse or significant other that's just like, you sure about that? Like, what
hmm.
about college? Like, what about high school?
Yeah.
So like that, I think played a huge role where we understood like we were really upfront about our goals and we didn't want to stand in each other's way. So I think that helps with our relationship because I feel like I've talked to some people where like, yo, my girlfriend doesn't want me to move across the country to go pursue this residency or to do an internship with this team, but I really want this and I could risk my relationship. Obviously
Mm,
every relationship is different, but if your significant other is holding you back to keep the relationship instead of trying to figure out a way to actually make it work, whether it's long distance or maybe they can find a job to where you're located or they have a remote job or whatever it is, then I feel like that's something you have to decide. Like for example, we told each other even while just dating like we don't ever want to say like, oh, I look back and because I was dating this person, I wanted to keep the relationship. I never went on towards my goals because I was too scared to lose you. Or look back and have regrets of like, dang, what if I did go for that internship or the clinical rotation or for that job interview or yeah, anything. But I was too worried that a girl was gonna come by and sweep you up and be available and was like a stay-at-home girl who makes sure she cooks and cleans for you, this, that, and the third, and it's like, yo, I get replaced. So it's something that we had
mm,
to talk about early, and then also too, then I do have to balance like, okay, I'm married. Divorce rate is really high with residency
mm,
fellowship. We didn't even talk about professional sports. So then what are you gonna do? So yes, there were times where okay, I have to cook, but if I cook, this has to last for like 2 days, like, or it has to last for 3 days, or it's like, I may not be able to cook today. Like those
Mm.
things are like, hey baby, can you help me with like trash or this? Like, and understanding like there's a give and take. Like if you're gonna be as supportive of me, doesn't mean that you have to be a stay-at-home husband or anything like that. We need to figure out like what your goals are too. So for example, for me, he pushed me so far to like, yo, you need to do dry needling, you need to do spinal manipulation and cracking necks and backs or whatever, and it costs this much. Okay, I'm gonna take on extra hours. That's amazing because when I was in residency fellowship, we couldn't add on another job. It was illegal based on our contract, and then we were already getting paid less than an actual staff physical therapist because it's a residency fellowship. So I can't contribute as much. So it's like your husband is adding extra hours to help you towards your goal, push you, push you, push you. So when you get there, you need to make sure you not be like, oh, I made it, I'm good. Yes,
Yeah.
give him praise and thank him for being like so supportive financially and emotionally and all that good stuff and the sacrifice for it. But you also need to make sure if you can't help along the way in that sense to return it, like when you get to your goal, like, okay, let's make sure we shift focus. Because if you really can't do it during, because there's an understanding you guys created, make sure then you're not like, I made it, leave my partner behind. Because that's another thing when people get successful, they're with you when you're struggling. When you get successful, because it even happens with men, so it's not just women. It's just more common
Mhm.
with men because usually the woman is the supportive person in the behind sometimes. Whether it's an actor, actress, for example, and then they're like, oh, I made it, okay, I'm good, and then it's like, hey, I'm over here, I'm the one that's been supporting you the whole time. So the
Mhm.
biggest thing is like understanding what his goals are and being supportive of that. Like he may want to go travel. I love to travel. I travel for work. But say he wants to go, I'm going to Puerto Rico, I'm going here. I'm like, yo, I can't go with you. Like, I have to understand that's some of the cost that comes with it. So I can't say I'm on a travel job in the NBA. It's 1 to 2% of our profession. Only 1 to 2% of us actually make it to the NBA. And then I'm going to make sure my husband waits for me to do anything so we could have fun together. And it's like, no, he has a life too. We have to understand we both have lives and I have to
Mhm.
let him live his life and we can respect each other that way because we can't be wrapped up in one another. Like we're going to be unhappy. Your happiness should not be wrapped in another person. So you have to know yourself, get to grow and understand like he sacrificed for you to get to here. Now you need to sacrifice some things, which unfortunately could be like he's going to spend more time with his mom right now. He may not be home. You're doing a lot of traveling. When you come home from a long road trip, he may have left to go see his mom. He may not be at home right now, or stuff like that. That you have to understand. Like you have to be creative with your dating, because just because you married, you don't stop dating. Be creative. So it's like, oh, I'm gonna go to LA. You want to come out there? Cool. Meet up in LA. Like we could do it that way. Um, and just make sure it works, like whatever the case may be, and keep checking in with one another, just like we talked about with players and staff, X, Y, and Z communication. Make sure it's good. We don't want any assumptions on even the relationship aspect, like oh, so he can't answer his phone or da da da. For example, I could be at a game, so no, I'm not gonna answer the phone. So
Yeah.
like I'm watching the game, I sit in the front row, front seat, and I'm watching the game. I have to make sure God forbid nothing happens. But if he doesn't know my schedule, he'd be like, he could, God forbid, if he's one of those jealous people, he'd be like, oh, so she's not answering her phone and this is and this, da da da. You need to make sure like you guys are communicating, whether it's a text message or like, oh, I have a break at this time, or it's like, just call me whenever you have time. And we understand like if we can't pick up the phone is because something work related or something popped up, because I'm always on call. So it could be late, it could be random times. I may think I'm off for that day and I might get called in. So have if that person has that understanding, you guys will be good in that standpoint, because you can't expect like, oh, I have this vacation. You need to understand I have a vacation, but a player may need me in Toronto, so I might have to go. Like, unfortunately, like we planned this out. There could be a chance and it may not happen. And I want you to
Mhm.
understand, like, I appreciate your efforts, but this is what I signed up for. So that's something that, again, just having that understanding that I don't think people like grasp it, and I think they're like, oh, I want to work in the NBA too. I want to do exactly what you're doing. And I'm not saying I have a player's life because I don't have the money like a player does, but they go through the same stuff, and you get an understanding of like, yo, like you're time is being consumed with a lot of work stuff, and then also you gotta figure out how to work on yourself, which like sleep, for example, working out, like stuff like that, to make sure you're healthy, because the health risks actually of medical staff is just as bad as EMTs and paramedics. Heart attacks are high, hypertension, strokes, all that risk is actually high the longer you work in the NBA and the more you're aging. So it's something that you have to keep in mind, because if you're not good yourself, you can't be good for anybody else. You can't be good for your spouse. You're bringing home your stuff from work, you're of no good. So yeah, got on a very long soapbox, but that's basically kind of want to like share that in particular, because I think people see the glam. When I say glam, meaning like, oh, I see you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm watching the game. I see you on the bench, or da 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 da, or you get to do all this
Yeah.
travel, da da da. But they don't know all the stuff that happens, or the sacrifice that happens, or the sacrifice to get here,
Mm-hmm.
and how like some people's relationship won't make it. So there's a lot of
Yeah.
people who are single, or a lot of people who are married and their spouse just stays at home because maybe they're a guy and they can do that, or I don't want to discount like same sex whatever. So say if the wife is the one that can stay and the other wife can travel, like however the dynamics are,
Mm-hmm.
that stuff can happen. But if you have a husband like me who's very also ambitious, like he's getting it too. So we have to understand each other. So you got to know who you're getting a relationship with, because when you start a career that's in depth, whether you're a physician or whatever, or media, like it may require of you some things that if the other person don't understand, like you may carry that stuff to work, and that's going to be bad. It's going to affect your performance.
Oh man, I shouldn't have asked that question because now like my brain just opened up and this could be a whole episode on its own, like the whole like behind the scenes life of a non NBA player but NBA personnel. Like because now my brain is I'm so curious now. Like how do you handle certain situations? How do you do this? How do you do that? So there's got to be a part
I was
two
going to say,
because my
whatever. I don't
brain
know how
is
you want
like,
to do it. Yeah. Because I was like, I also want to make sure like people are not listening and they're like, yo, this podcast is so long. But
yeah,
um, yeah, for sure. Like I think there's so many different avenues we can go into, but I think
hmm,
that's another piece that no one really talks about. They talk about injuries. They talk about, how's it like to work with so and this, and they make so much money, and how are they? Are they really mean people? Are they nice people? Da 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 da. Like, but no one's really talking about like what you're talking about right there, like the relationship, or like how you're handling it. You're like, how much sleep are you getting? You're landing at 3 a.m. in one city, and then you got to play it back to back. You're already in another time zone. Excuse me. But your husband, you have a relationship, so you also need to check in with that person, but they're sleeping. Then it's like all that stuff. Yeah.
yeah.
Yo, like, what are you doing right now? Like, for real? I I know what the problem is. You didn't got too comfortable. Things done got cute because you think what you did last week was cool. You think you can kind of relax, take a vacation this week. You think because how many points you dropped your career high, you dropped a little 30 piece last week. You thinking this week is just it's vacation time. It's time to relax and chill. It's not it, man. This new level means you have new challenges. So the work's not done yet. You're not able to just relax and just take a break because you have to outwork and outdo what you did yesterday. You have to work harder than you did before because the new level requires new things from you. So just as a reminder that when you get the next workout in, just keep it as a reminder that progress is the only goal.
I'm so interested, and it's kind of like I don't deal with that, but like somewhat similar line of work, entrepreneurship and what you do is
Yes.
not too far off from each other. So it's like I think about my future with that too, and like and then it's weird with the whole social dating thing we're dealing with now. Like I'm
Yeah.
young, so I'm still dealing with that, and it's
Yeah.
like the pressure of being a man, okay, the pressure of being a woman,
Yeah.
it's the new woman, the independent woman, all different stuff, and
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah. That's a good
oh man,
conversation too. Yeah, that's a good one. Cause
yeah,
yeah,
so
no, that'll be a good one. Cause like I will intimidate, and I do still intimidate a lot of people. And a
mhm.
lot, and I don't mean just like women, because um I don't play for that part of the team, but meaning like men, like even before I was
Oh yeah, I
dating my
know,
husband or whatever, like you tell them your goals, and they knew I was serious. Like I was not playing. So if you're not part of my goals, like if you trying to play around, I ain't got time for you. Like I'm sorry, I don't have time for
yeah,
you. But like even now, um Yeah, I think it's like interesting because then it's like I have to then work on. I have at work. I have to be masculine. Long story short, I have
Mm-hmm.
to be assertive. I cannot be pushed over, but I also have to have that dance, that balance of like the compassion and the empathy because I don't want to go to a player like an asshole and just be like, oh, suck it up. You ain't that much pain. Da, 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 da. Like you need to have that empathy, but then I don't need to be too sympathetic. Then I'm like, oh, they're not ready to play because they don't feel well. Like you need to have that balance.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I go home, it's almost like a switch. Like you need to work. I need to work on some stuff on myself as well to make sure I'm not coming home masculine to a masculine man and be
Yeah.
like, oh, what are we, I'm just wearing my, because this is what I wear to work. Like, oh, I'm wearing my t-shirt and shorts and men's clothes, and you're not leaving. You're not, you know, entertaining your husband in any type of way or fashion. You're just wearing men's clothes the whole time. You're not working on yourself. Like, or how you talk with your husband can't bring that same energy from work to your husband. Like he'd be like, "Who the hell are you
Mm-hmm.
talking to?" Like you can't,
Yeah.
So it's that balance. I feel like a lot of women are dealing with whether they're in higher positions where they have to be assertive, they have to show like, "Yo, I'm the boss" or whatever that is, but not being too aggressive because I think that's another conversation for another day.
Mm-hmm.
But that assertiveness, and it's a fine line sometimes, but having that confidence, but then also being having a serving attitude as a physical therapist, but then also a serving attitude in service to your husband to
Mm-hmm.
because once you serve your husband, it's gonna be easy for him to serve you, and it doesn't matter. It could be anything. It could be how you talk. You come home, you're yelling and being all aggressive and stuff, and he could be someone that matches your energy, or he just shuts down. And you over there complaining like, how come you won't talk to me? Da, 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 da. Or it's like, why are you talking to me like that? And it's like, because you brought that energy in
Mm-hmm.
because you're still bringing it from work and you need to figure out what you can do to dissociate that. Whether you need to go to a gym and go work out, you need to stay in your car and just pray or meditate, whatever you do. Listen to some music, talk to your mom or family, have a therapist, an actual mental therapist, whatever that is. Strategies to work on that. Try not to bring it home. Like do the best you can because at the end of the day, like they have access to you at all times, and also you spend more time with work and the players over 90 something percent of the time more than your own spouse. So that's the part that's tricky. You spend more time with them, like like quantifiably, like you spend more time than your spouse. So you're around
Mm-hmm.
them, they're in your business, you got the bathroom there right there, like they're calling and texting you, you at home, you can't turn it off. Like just like an entrepreneur, you can't turn it off. Like so
Yeah.
stuff like that. And just making sure you can kind of distinguish some of those things because you can't turn your phone off. Like so stuff like that. So
Oh, I'm
fun
so
stuff.
interested for this part two.
Yeah,
So interested.
good stuff.
Like, so y'all know what part two is gonna be like. So just stay tuned for whenever that comes because I'm so excited about this because I never hear this side and now my brain's like 1,000 questions keep coming up.
Yeah,
So
it's gonna be it'll be good. I think this will be great because I have not heard anybody else talk about this. So on a platform. So this is
so
awesome.
let's be the first.
Yeah,
We're gonna be the
that's
first to
great. Well,
break
yeah,
down.
make sure it's blasted. Everybody knows about it. Tune in and all that good stuff. That'd be good.
Exactly. Most definitely. So yeah, I appreciate you coming on.
It was great. I appreciate this. This has been great.
Yeah, it was good. I think that we have to figure out how to do this part too, though, because my brain keeps going to part. Like I
Hey,
keep thinking of stuff,
write
so I
down
have
those
to.
questions. Write down all the stuff you're thinking about. So I think it'll be good.
Oh man, yeah. So we have to cut this off though,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
we're not
yeah,
gonna be
yeah,
like
yeah. Yeah. I know
2 hours
it's
in.
getting long. I'm gonna make sure like everybody can listen through the whole thing and not be like, "Oh, just keep going," because we'll have a part two. I think it'll be good.
Yeah. So if you listen to this far, I appreciate you, because this is a long one, but nah, man, this is a good one though. Hopefully you guys got something away from it. Cause this is a doctor here. Like
Oh
she
my
she's
gosh.
she's educated, guys. Like,
Oh man.
ooh, I like that. So I got something I could poke you with now. I like this.
I
So yeah,
see. There are a couple people that they poke me, and it's with that in particular, Dr. Brooks, and I'm like, yo, please.
Just relax.
It's
Like I got you. I
Vanessa,
got you.
Vanessa. It's all good, Vanessa.
Dr. Vanessa, then we can do that too. So guys, we got Dr. Vanessa.
Oh goodness. But I
Yeah, so
appreciate the respect, though. I do appreciate the respect. But yes, we already acknowledged that. But you can just call me Vanessa.
yeah. So we got Vanessa. I'm not saying y'all can call her this. I'm just saying she told me I can call her this. So
Yes, yes.
just
Case by
we,
case,
we
case by
cool like
case.
that.
Yes.
Yeah. So but that's it, guys. Appreciate you for watching and or listening. You should be doing both, but if you're doing one or the other, I appreciate that too. If you're on YouTube, subscribe. Appreciate you. You know, we here now. We family because we've been an hour and a half in this thing, so we
Oh
family
yeah,
basically.
that's so crazy.
Um,
But it was good though.
yeah, like, share, subscribe the video. If you're on Apple, you got the power to like leave comments and reviews. So do that. And I don't think it's worked for other podcasts. I don't know one that's heard this because I'm allowed to do this. You're only allowed to leave 5-star reviews. So like it's kind of broke, just a little broke. So you just leave 5-star and that's it. And only good comments. So that just do that for me, guys. If it's anything like 4 or less, then it just won't work for mine. I don't know about other people, but mine is like broken. So just 5-star and up. Uh, but not for real. Like leave a good review because that helps me, helps y'all, so I can get more doctors and stuff on this platform to give you guys game. If you want other stuff, just share some good stuff too. Share it with somebody. If you want to follow me on social media, you can do so at BeBall Jones. That's BeBall Jones. That's pretty much everywhere. Just Google it. Like I did it on purpose, so I'm pretty easy to Google. If you want to follow Vanessa here, Miss Vanessa, I'll have her stuff below. And if you don't want to follow, then just like hit her up at a game, be like, yo, you were on the BeBall Jones podcast. Like, you're pretty cool. And your husband's a real one. So I appreciate
Yeah,
y'all
he a real one, all right.
because
Yes, man. Thank God for him. Woo.
so yeah, man. I think that's it. Like all the little cleanup stuff. Um, I have 2 YouTube pages, one for like training and one for the podcast. I follow both of them. I have a clothing brand, guys. You can get a t-shirt. Oh yeah, I'm doing this new thing. So um it's gonna prolong a little bit more, but it's whatever. I can edit this stuff out. I don't edit. I don't know why I said that. So um what is a goal that you have right now in your career or personal life, whatever? What's like a big goal that you have?
Um, I'm just gonna put this out there. Be a
Okay.
director of rehab or medical director for an NBA team
Mm,
before I say peace out.
mm.
Yeah.
How does that goal make you feel when you think about it?
Um, it makes me feel empowered, but it also makes me feel that there's never been one that looks like me. So of course, it gets me like thinking, praying about it first because I don't want to be a selfish goal, but also I want it to be something that says a statement to those that look like me that you can be in this position or it can be attainable. But also knowing like it's not only my effort, but that God is the one that allowed me or placed me to be here. So faith with works, basically. Like I'm doing my part, but I'm not gonna sell my soul. I'm not gonna be like, oh, I'm gonna only wear my hair like this. Like it may be braided, it may be curly, natural. It's gonna be me. Like I'm gonna always get my nails done, like stuff like that. Like I'm gonna be me. I'm not gonna try to change to fit a mold. But that it's attainable and yeah, and it's not saying I'm trying to be here for a long time, but I'm here for a good time. So I'm here to make progress, trailblaze, make history, made history already being the first black physical therapist, athletic trainer, female. But I'm
Hmm.
trying to make more history and then also empower those behind me. So that is my goal. I want to empower, like, I want it to be like, oh, snap, okay, it can happen. Like, that's what I want.
Mm. I think I like that because you said you want to be aware if it is selfish or not, but the key thing that you kind of just dispelled that with is the fact that you want to do this for others to be like, yo, I did this. I did part one of being a trailblazer, breaking through, being the first, black woman to do this at this point. But you can do that, and you can go further and do this more.
Exactly. Exactly.
So like, so
Exactly.
the levels of progress that is possible is basically unlimited. Because if I can do this and this, that means you can do it too. But guess what? You can do even more than that.
Yes. Surpass me. I got
Yeah. And I
I ain't
think,
afraid of that.
go ahead.
Surpass me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what makes it a true goal. Like we get, I mean, you gotta start off with a selfish goal because you gotta get yourself straight. But it
So
gets to a
straight.
point where it's like, all right, what's next? Because you can only do so much for you before you're content. But it's like, okay, you got kids. Okay, boom, what's next for the kids? Or you got family. Okay, what's next for them? Or you got people looking up to you. You got students and everything. So it's like, okay, what's next for y'all? So I think for you, progress is the only goal fits for you because it's like, okay, I've kept my goal to make progress to show you all that you can continue to make progress too. Even if it's not in this field, even not in this
Right.
lane, you can still strive and be a pioneer in your thing. So you want to be the first engineer at this whatever firm or to do this project or whatever. I did this in this lane. You can do that in your lane.
Right.
So I think it's dope how your vision, it's a right vision for you because you were cognizant of like, okay, this could be selfish. But then literally the next thought was like, okay, I want to do this because X, Y, and Z. So she can know she can do this too. So I think that's how the goal is a true goal because it's bigger than you at this point.
Yes. Great.
So that's dope. But yeah, like that's how progress on the goal kind of fits for her. So that's how you guys can like apply it to you. So progress is the only goal. You feel me? Like
Mhm.
whatever that goal is, take that and replace it and just put progress up there. So just figure out how you can continue to make progress to get to that goal. So if you want that as a reminder, like you guys to just know it. So every time you look down and wear your shirt or you look in the mirror, it's like, yo, progress is on the go. Go ahead and get you a shirt. You feel me? So link is below. Um, I think that's it, guys. Oh, on Fridays, I got a like little show called Hoop Gems. It's just like 5 minute little game. You feel me? Like mental how tos, give a little mental game, a little bit of motivation. I think motivation kind of corny, but I know y'all like that, so I give it to you anyway. So just a little mental game on Fridays, just quick little stuff, man. So appreciate you watching, been tuning in so far. It's gonna keep going. Um, but I think that's it. Anything else you want to share with the people?
Nah, that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for having me. It's been good and great conversation, great flow. So I'm excited for part two.
It might end up being like 3, 4, 5 because my brain just keeps going like
Or,
that. But we'll see.
hey, we'll make it work. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, most definitely. But that's it, y'all. We're gonna stop talking here because y'all kind of tired of hearing us talking at this point. Probably not because you still listen.
There we go.
But nah, we're done. We're out of here. Appreciate you. See you
Thank you.
next week.
Thank you.